In the heart of Aurora, Colorado, nestled on a quiet block surrounded by modest homes and small mom-and-pop shops, stood a grocery store that meant more to the community than just food. Hayes Family Market was a lifeline. A gathering spot. A place where people remembered your name, asked about your kids, and offered help when no one else would. And behind that store was Marco Hayes, a quiet, humble black man who never boasted about what he built, even when he had every right to. Marco had inherited the store from his father, who had run it with pride and principle for over 2 decades. When his father passed, Marco gave up a high-paying job in finance to return home. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to honor the legacy. And he did far more than maintain it. He turned the store into a beacon of hope. He stocked shelves with fresh produce from local farmers. Created scholarship funds for high school seniors. And every Thanksgiving, he made sure no family in the area went without a turkey. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a builder of trust. But things took a turn when Marco's wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. Suddenly, his days were split between the store and hospital rooms. The community rallied behind him, offering prayers and meals, but he needed someone to help run the daily operations. That's when Brent Myers entered the picture. A sharply dressed, charismatic white man with a background in corporate retail. Brent presented himself as someone who respected Marco's mission. He said all the right things. Promised to honor the store's values. Marco, tired and overwhelmed, believed him. For the first few months, Brent appeared to do well. Sales were steady, shelves were organized, and customers still received warm greetings. But little by little, the soul of the store began to shift. Familiar faces disappeared. Long-time employees, many of whom were black or Latino, were quietly fired. Prices crept higher. Community programs were canceled. And new hires looked suspiciously similar, white, polished, and with resumes from major chains. Marco raised concerns, but Brent dismissed them smoothly, saying, "You've got bigger things to focus on, my friend. Leave the details to me." Marco didn't like it. But with his wife's condition worsening, he didn't have the strength to fight. He trusted Brent. That trust would be shattered. While Marco was at the hospital one evening, Brent called an emergency board meeting. With forged documents, manipulated numbers, and a well-rehearsed story, he convinced the small board that Marco had abandoned the store and jeopardized its future. He orchestrated a vote to remove Marco as acting owner, and succeeded. The next morning, Marco arrived to find security guards at the door. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes," one of them said, "you're no longer welcome here." Just like that, he was locked out of the very business he built with his own hands. But Brent didn't stop there. He told employees and customers alike that Marco had walked away. That he cashed out and was done with the neighborhood. Rumors spread. People whispered. And Marco, still caring for his sick wife, couldn't respond. He watched helplessly as everything he stood for was dismantled, and his character was assassinated by the man he had once trusted. It took months before the truth began to emerge. Customers noticed the shift. The store felt colder, transactional. Employees spoke in hushed tones about Brent's behavior. One former cashier, Rosa, who had worked there for 7 years before being abruptly fired, had enough. She posted a video online detailing everything, the firings, the lies, and the real reason behind Marco's absence. But what shocked people most was the audio she released, a secret recording of Brent making a chilling remark. "Marco was just a diversity pick anyway. I'm the one actually running this place like a real business." The video went viral. Thousands shared it. Local news picked up the story. Protests formed outside the store. People chanted Marco's name and demanded accountability. Brent tried to spin it, releasing a corporate-sounding statement, but the damage was done. A team of pro bono lawyers stepped forward to represent Marco. They dug into the documents Brent had used and uncovered massive fraud, forged signatures, doctored records, even theft from the company account. Marco took the case to court. For the first time in months, he stood tall, not just for himself, but for every voice Brent had silenced. The courtroom was packed with supporters. And when the judge ruled in his favor, reinstating him as the rightful owner and ordering an investigation into Brent's practices, the gallery erupted in applause. But Marco didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. Instead, on a quiet Tuesday morning, with rain gently falling on the pavement, he walked back into his store. No cameras. No speeches. Just him, and the soul of the store he loved. But word spread quickly. Customers began showing up. Former employees returned. Someone brought a "Welcome Home, Marco" banner. Another brought coffee. Within hours, the parking lot was full. It felt like a homecoming. Brent? He never showed. He had skipped town days before the ruling, leaving behind unpaid debts and pending lawsuits. Marco walked to the front counter, picked up the old store microphone, and spoke softly but firmly. This store was never mine alone. It was always ours. And I promise you, it always will be. The crowd was silent. Some cried. Others clapped. And at that moment, something changed. The community, broken and scattered by deceit, came back together. Because while racism tried to erase him, and greed tried to take what he built, the truth brought Marco home. And his return? It left everyone speechless. The days that followed were a blur of emotions and rebuilding. Marco's return wasn't just about reclaiming his store. It was about reclaiming the trust and love of his community, something that had been severely tested by Brent's lies and manipulation. But the real challenge wasn't just putting the business back in order, it was about healing the wounds that had been caused by Brent's betrayal. Marco knew that, to rebuild, he couldn't just focus on the walls and shelves. He needed to focus on the people. And so, he began by holding meetings with his employees, one by one. He apologized to those who had been wronged, even if they weren't there when it all began. The ones who had been fired unjustly. The ones who had been pressured into silence. The ones who felt like they had no voice. He gave them a chance to speak, to air their grievances, and most importantly, to come back home. And they did. Rosa returned. So did Jamal, the young stock clerk who had been one of the first to be pushed out when Brent took control. Slowly but surely, Marco rebuilt his team. Some old faces returned, but new ones, just as dedicated, showed up as well. They weren't just there for a paycheck. They were there to be a part of something bigger. They were there to make sure the store didn't just survive, it thrived. At the same time, Marco knew that a symbolic gesture wasn't enough. He had to actively restore the trust of the community. So, he reached out to the local schools and organizations to reinstate the scholarship programs that had been axed by Brent. He met with community leaders, asking how he could support them. He expanded his partnerships with local farmers, ensuring the shelves were stocked with fresh, organic produce that was affordable for everyone, no matter their income. But perhaps the most significant step he took was one that was deeply personal. Marco, having learned the full extent of the betrayal, confronted Brent, not out of anger, but out of a need for closure. The confrontation wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It wasn't about revenge. It was simply about Marco saying the words Brent had never expected to hear, "I forgive you." Brent, who had arrogantly thought he could walk away scot-free, was caught off guard. He didn't apologize, but the moment left him rattled. For Marco, it wasn't about Brent's apology. It was about freeing himself from the weight of the betrayal. And by forgiving Brent, Marco took back control, not of the store, but of his own peace of mind. News of Marco's forgiveness spread quickly. People who had seen him as just another businessman now saw him as a symbol of resilience and integrity. He had the opportunity to tear down everything Brent had built, but instead, he chose to rebuild. And in doing so, Marco showed the world that character could never be stolen. As the months went on, Hayes Family Market transformed. It was more than a store. It was a gathering place once again, a reflection of Marco's unwavering belief in his community, in the people who had stood by him, and in the power of a single person to make a difference. The shelves were full, the registers rang with the sound of customers coming and going, but there was something intangible, something beautiful, that could never be measured by sales numbers or profit margins, a sense of home. Marco stood in front of the store one evening, looking out at the familiar street, now filled with people stopping by for groceries, a cup of coffee, or just a chat. He smiled, not because he had won, but because he had found something far more precious, peace, purpose, and the unwavering support of his community. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the store, and Marco knew this. Hayes Family Market would continue to stand, not because of his efforts alone, but because the community had fought for it, alongside him. And together, they would never let anything, or anyone, take it from them again. Final thought. Marco's story wasn't just about a man reclaiming his business. It was about a man who fought to preserve the values that truly matter: family, trust, loyalty, and community. Even when faced with betrayal, greed, and racism, Marco found a way to rise, not just for himself, but for those who believed in him. His story proves that no matter how deep the wounds, the strength of a community can heal even the most painful scars. And for Marco Hayes, his return wasn't just a victory. It was a message to everyone who had ever been silenced, that truth, integrity, and love for one's roots will always prevail.